Hello, 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 my friends, and welcome to Sanctuary Online. It is, it's so hard to say, October 2022 in our world, and tonight we have an exciting show for you. I just want to offer a bit of logistics. I know we have some folks who are possibly haven't been with us recently. So just so you know, it's a great for you to enable your video. It's wonderful to present when you can see people's faces. And especially tonight, as we say, ooh and ah, to everything that we're going to see from Ken's travelogue about his time with Mel in Southeast Asia. And also, it's great for you to be in gallery view. And what that means is up on the top of your Zoom screen, you should see a little view, and you can pop that down and choose gallery. Gallery lets us all see each other. So we're kind of like we're sitting around the fireplace almost. I know, dreamer, in Sanctuary's big living room. And Ken's poking his little thing, and we're all watching everything together and sitting around together having a chat. It's also great for us to know who you are and kind of let us know who's here tonight. So if you want to open your chat box and offer your first, last name, email address if you don't think we have it yet, and maybe where you're calling in from tonight. I'm hoping the weather is good where you are. We had one of our last beautiful days here in northern Michigan, and it begins to rain. And this weekend, I'm afraid, on the extended forecast, we saw little snowflakes. So it's like time to head back to Texas. Oh, just to let you know, a great way to get a hold of us. Every Tuesday, Barb's done a little text feature that says, hey, it's Tuesday, and this is what's happening at Sanctuary Online. When we're on our summer schedule and we're only going every other week, it's also a great reminder from Barb to say, are you guys on tonight or next week? And so you can also reach us on our Facebook page and email us at talk to us at Sanctuary in the Woods. Coming up later this month is Joan by Catherine C. Chen, our book club, which is still famous, wonderful, and rousing conversationalists. We are just reading through books. And this month is Joan, a novel about Joan of Arc. And that's what I'd like to say about that, right? Beyond this, Barb, I think I'm going to toss this to you to set us into the evening. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, welcome everybody and enjoy. I cannot wait.
All right, well, just real quickly here before Ken jumps into the Cambodia piece, I have been affectionately called geographically challenged. So it's helpful for me to kind of see where in the world we're talking about. So I'm just going to pull up a map here and show you a little bit. Cambodia is in Southeast Asia. Many of you probably know a lot more than I do about it, but just in case, there are a number of countries in this area: Thailand, Vietnam, Laos. And as I back out, you'll get a sense. This is Myanmar and Malaysia are in this part of the world as well. China is to the north up here, Taiwan and the Philippines to the east, and China and India. So you get a sense for where in the world we're actually going to visit tonight with Ken. So I will jump off of this map and let Ken go ahead and get started. Ken, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? I just totally lost everybody.
We can hear you.
Okay, everybody just came back. Let me see if I can get, but I don't have any pictures on screen. Hold on a minute.
Okay.
I don't know what happened there. Just all of a sudden, my entire.
Were you trying to share screen, Ken?
No, I wasn't doing any touch. And there went again. Okay, now I've got to join the meeting.
John.
Did we lose him?
Or he's just frozen?
Yeah, I think his internet is unstable, because if he says that, that probably means he sees black screens for everybody's faces.
All right, well, we'll give him a minute here to,
That's typically what happens
Yeah.
when you have unstable internet. Is Tom also frozen up here?
I don't see Tom, I just see the kitchen. And
I
so
think Tom just left to go see,
Okay,
know, what's
somebody's
going
in
on with
there.
him.
Yeah. Tom, you can see. Ken,
yeah, I think Ken is gonna
reboot.
join again, dial back in again.
Okay.
So while we're waiting for him, this is a little teaser of what we'll see. The stupa in the picture on the left is from a memorial of the killing fields. The Royal Palace in the center and Angkor Wat on the right-hand side. So,
here comes Ken again.
yep. All right, Ken, are you back? And there's Janice. Hi, Janice.
Ken looks frozen again, which is not a good sign for tonight.
Okay.
I'm wondering, Barb, if you should run over or if we should.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Oh,
take
hold on,
my,
hold on. I can see Ken now on Tom. Ken, you're on mute. Ken, you're on mute. We can't hear you. Ken, you're on mute. It looks like he's on a telephone, so he doesn't know how to get off mute, probably. Right?
Help me.
Tap on the screen and then the little microphone will pop up and you just tap on the microphone and it will unmute you. All the words that are now part of our vocabulary. Unmute.
Yep, Ken, you're still on mute.
Ken,
Barb,
can you tap on the screen?
Barb, I think you need to go over and rescue.
Yeah, I think I might.
And Barb, give me another slide and we'll do more conversation.
Okay.
Oh,
This
great.
is context for the when. And Ken will have more to say about this, but to give you some idea of what was going on in the United States and the rest of the world. And I will be back.
Can you yeah, stop sharing your screen, Barb, thanks. Before you go.
Okay.
There we go. All right. Well, let's do this. Mr. Bud Twilly.
Can you hear me?
ahead. You all just came
Yes,
back
we
from.
can hear you now, Ken.
Oh, you got him?
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, I have nothing on my computer. Okay, it just says Zoom quit unexpectedly. That's all I have. And then
Okay.
I'm using Tom's phone now.
Okay.
All your slides are on. Barb, were you gonna run the slides or can you run the slides?
Yep, I'm running the slides.
Barbara's doing the slides.
All right, then that's gonna work fine.
There we go.
Okay, now more stuff's coming up on my screen. I don't know what all this stuff is.
Ken, if I were you, I
Okay.
would completely reboot
Yeah,
your
okay.
computer.
Okay,
might
can I
pop up.
just, okay, let me ask a question. Can I just continue talking and
Yep.
Barb can show the slides and you will
Yep.
be able to hear and see?
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah,
it
Okay,
works.
great. Okay, let's go.
let's
Okay,
go.
let's go. Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. Sorry for all this. You know, you live by technology and you die by technology. This has never happened to me before. I don't know what this is. I just got a message that said Zoom quit unexpectedly and it's gone. Okay, so welcome everyone and thank you for being here. You know, it's a wonderful thing when you find somebody that you like to travel with. Mel White and I have been friends for 30 years. And we were talking in 2007 And he said, he was talking about something in Europe. And I said, no, I've never been to Europe. And he said, oh, well, let's go. So in 2008, we traveled all over Europe together, found out that we really enjoy traveling together. And so in 2014, we traveled around Southeast Asia. And it is a part of that experience that I really want to share with you this evening. What you see on your screen right now are 3 different slides, which just are indicative of the 3 main destinations that we have tonight. The one on the left is the stupa at the beginning of the memorial park to the killing fields. The one in the middle is a part of the Royal Palace. And of course, the one on the right is Angkor Wat. What we know today as the Kingdom of Cambodia, we are told probably has been inhabited since prehistoric times. However, it became an entity sometime around 1500 years ago when it was established as the Khmer Empire. And although today it is considered one of the richest countries in the world in terms of biodiversity and seasonal tropical forest, Cambodia has been so plundered by other countries, and the rate of deforestation there today is so high that the United Nations considers it one of the world's countries that is most vulnerable to climate change. And unfortunately, it is also weakened these days by poverty and by corruption and by human rights violations. So Barbara, if we can go to the next slide.
Yep.
As I lived in Southeast Asia and traveled through Southeast Asia and Far East Asia, one of the things that I learned is that Asians know their history much better than we know our history. And a lot of them know our history better than we know our history. So if you were educated like I was in the English-speaking West, we may have been taught what was happening in the Western part of the world, but very little about what was happening at the same time on the other side of the world. And so this little timeline just lets you know when some of the most important things we're going to talk about tonight happened in Asia, what was happening in our world. And the first thing you see there is that when Angkor Wat was at the height of its power and influence as a religious center and as a royal center and as a governmental center, that was at about exactly the same time the Crusades were happening. And then when the Royal Palace, which will be our next destination this evening, was being built in Phnom Penh, Abraham Lincoln was president. And when the Khmer Rouge genocide of the killing fields was taking place in Cambodia, that's when the first moon landing was happening. So that is actually a part of our more recent history. Next slide, Barb.
Okay.
So the map of Cambodia that you see on the left, which is more specific than the one we saw earlier, I wanted to pinpoint the 3 places where there are stars on this map because they are really significant for our discussion this evening. The one at the very bottom of your slide there, that's the location of Phnom Penh, which of course is the capital of Cambodia. The one in the center, that's the location of Angkor Wat. It is near the city of Siem Reap, which is the second largest city in Cambodia. And you'll notice that the star at the top is actually across the border into southeastern Thailand, but it's very important for our discussion tonight, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. What you see on the right next to it is a picture of Pol Pot, and the darkest period in Cambodia's history began when he became the dictator in 1975. He was a communist revolutionary. He renamed the country to Communist Kampuchea, and he set out to purge and cleanse it into what he called a pure communist country. And when he was asked what he meant by that, he said it would be a rural, agrarian utopia, and that the only way to achieve that was by executing all professionals, all intellectuals, all ethnic Japanese, Chinese, Chams, Thais, all Christians, and all Buddhist monks. He was in power for only 4 years, from 1975 until 1979. And after this genocide was over, UNICEF investigated more than 20,000 mass graves, and they estimated that at least 3 million Cambodians were murdered by the Pol Pot regime. And that was in a country whose total population at the time was about 8 million. That means almost half of the entire population of the country of Cambodia was murdered in a 4-year period. That's over 2,000 people a day, every day, 7 days a week for 4 years, which makes it one of the largest and most brutal genocides in the history of the world. And most of those who were killed were taken, first of all, to interrogation camps where they were interrogated and then tortured. And if they survived that, then they were taken to one of many locations around the country where they were killed and buried in mass graves. And those locations became known as the killing fields. And the world really learned about the extent of this horror through a movie in 1984, the Academy Award-winning movie by the same title, The Killing Fields. So next slide, please, Barb. So the best known monument to the killing fields is a memorial park that Mel and I visited in the village of Chiang Ek, which is about 10 miles south of Phnom Penh. And this stupa is the entrance into that memorial park. And next slide. The picture on the right is of Mel and me standing in front of that stupa. And then the picture on the left is of what's inside of it. It is shelf after shelf after shelf of human skulls. Next slide. So many of the killing fields, which are located all over Cambodia, had thousands of shallow mass graves. And our guide explained to us that these shallow graves, like the one you see on the left here, were so shallow because the people who were being killed and buried in them were required to dig them, and that they were already so weak from torture and from malnutrition that they just couldn't dig them any deeper. The next picture, Mel and I visited after several days of torrential monsoon rains, and it's not unusual because many of these shallow graves have never been excavated, that after the monsoon rains, human bones and clothing will surface after these rains. And we were there after a couple of days of really torrential rains. And this is a picture, as we were walking by one of these graves, we saw human bones and clothing. And we notified one of the officials there of the park, and he came out, and the second picture is of him pulling human bones up out of the ground. And you can also see some human clothing that had emerged there as well. Now, this gets really gruesome, but the next picture, the sign that is next to that tree reads, a killing tree against which executioners beat children. And we were told that infants' heads were bashed against this tree, and then they were thrown into the graves because as Pol Pot's revolution progressed, they started to run out of ammunition. And Pol Pot told the executioners at all of these killing field sites to find ways to kill these people other than using bullets. And so infants were bashed against this tree and then thrown into the graves. And then the next one, the sign on that fence reads, mass grave with victims with cut heads. And that meant that the people in those graves were killed with hoes and shovels and axes instead of with bullets. One of the saddest things about this is that many of those executioners who were killing all of these people were boys and girls between the ages of 12 and 14, because they were told that they had the choice to either kill all of these people or to kill their own families. So as we gathered around that big stupa at the end of our 2-hour walk through these killing fields, Mel and I had realized that of the 12 or 14 people who were sort of in our group, all except for a couple of Asian people, we were all white, English-speaking people of European extraction, or appeared to be. And so the last thing our guide said to us was something like, don't ever think something like this can't happen in your country, because it can. So Joe, in Viet Nam just totally crushed him. He and all of his military officers disappeared into the jungle, where they lived for several years. Pol Pot died in 1998 of a heart attack while he was being held for a trial in The Hague for crimes against humanity. So from 1979 until 1998, he made several attempts to come back into power. And he still had a huge following, but he never was able to succeed at recovering power in Cambodia. And in 1997, he was taken into custody for crimes against humanity and died of a heart attack in 1998, right before he was to stand trial in The Hague. Any other questions?
I just have a comment, Papa.
Yeah.
I worked with a woman whose parents were killed there. They were teachers,
Yes.
and she wore glasses. Sari wore glasses, and she took them off and acted stupid
Yes.
so they wouldn't come after her, and she was able to escape.
Yes.
But I
Yes. All people who wore glasses were executed. All people who had any kind of professional degree were executed. And realized this was 1975 to 1979. Many people are still alive in Cambodia. I met many people in Cambodia who lived through this. Yeah, so that's the way she saved her life, Darcel? That's
yes,
amazing.
her actually, before they took her parents told her to talk gibberish, hide your glasses, and get out.
Yes. Yep.
I had no idea, Ken, that it was this extensive.
Yes. Well, many people did not really learn about the extent of this until the 1984 movie entitled The Killing Fields. Some of you may have seen that or remember it. That's when the real horror of this, was introduced to the rest of the world. A movie called The Killing Fields, and it won several Academy Awards. Okay, I don't know if Joby, can you hear me? Are you monitoring this?
Ken, there's another question.
Okay,
Tony, do you want to unmute and ask directly?
I can. I just wanted to know, did he spend some miserable time?
We lost
can't hear.
we lost the sound on that, Tony. We can see that you're talking, but can't really hear. I'm gonna read it. Tony was asking how long Pol Pot was imprisoned before the trial and how old was he?
yes. I'm not sure how old he was, but he was only in prison for about 2 years. He succeeded in eluding captivity by moving around primarily in the jungles close to the Thai border for all of those years. And at several different times, he attempted to regain power, but he failed every time, at doing that. But he had only been in custody, I think, for about 2 or 3 years, maybe, before he died. So he lived most of the rest of his life as a free person.
Okay. All right, Ken,
Barb,
why don't you go on to a little bit
move
less
on.
intense?
Okay. Okay, next slide then. We're going to have a little more fun now. That was the more difficult part of our journey. Well, one of the most fun things about traveling around the world is exploring the different cuisines, that people enjoy. One day we stopped at a little roadside market, and one vendor was selling all kinds of fried insects. He had fried roaches and fried crickets and fried spiders. And this is Mel pretending that he's eating one of the fried spiders. I promise you, he didn't actually eat it, but he did pretend to eat it. Okay, now our next destination is going to be the Royal Palace. I see your comment there, Barb. The Royal Palace, which is located in Phnom Penh, the Khmer Royal Palace. It's on the banks of the Mekong River. Of course, I did not take this picture. It's an aerial picture, but I did take all the other pictures that we're going to be seeing in this segment. So the Royal Palace is the residence of Cambodia's monarch and royal family. The king of Cambodia has never had a queen. It's always been kings. And the king of Cambodia since 2004 has been Norodom Sihamoni, who is their first confirmed bachelor king. And so he lives in the royal residence part of this palace right by himself and has since 2004. And yes, there have been many, many rumors about this particular king. Unlike other monarchs, the king of Cambodia is actually elected. He's elected by a special tribunal, but the one requirement is that he has to be a member of one of the two ruling houses and families of Cambodia. This royal palace, like most of the palaces in the East particularly, is also the site of a lot of religious festivals and government events and cultural celebrations. And it is actually relatively new in terms of the history of Cambodia, which of course has a really ancient history because this palace was built sometime around 1860. The first royal capital of the Khmer Empire was Angkor Wat, which we will visit next. And it began there in about 800 and was there until about the year 1500 of the Common Era. At that time, it was overrun and it was sacked by the Siamese people, who are now, of course, the Thai people. And after that, it was moved to several different locations until it finally arrived. I may be able to get on here in just a minute.
Recording in progress.
Okay,
Okay, I can see everybody now. The problem is that I've got all kinds of,
Just give me the phone.
okay, I'm giving Tom the phone. He's going to turn it off. And I can see all of you now, and I can see the slide too. So I feel a lot better.
Everybody wave.
That's great.
Okay, this is wonderful. If we can keep this, it'll be just wonderful. Okay, so this palace was built in 1860 because the actual seat of government when Angkor Wat was destroyed, almost destroyed in about 1500. The center of government moved around to several different places and finally arrived here in Phnom Penh in the 1850s. And this palace, as you can see, like many in the world, is actually a huge compound that has a number of different structures inside of it. I want to introduce you to 4 of the most important structures that are a part of the public areas of this palace compound. So our next slide, please, Barb. On the left, you see the Great Throne Hall. And this building actually contains 3 different throne rooms. And each of those rooms has a different kind of throne in it. And all of the audiences with the monarch are held in one of those 3 rooms. And depending on your status, how important either the individual or the delegation that's being received is, you will get to be welcomed either in the low hall or in the medium hall or in the high hall. Little bit of classism going on there. So the Great Hall in this building, which occupies most of the rest of the building, is where most of the important ceremonial festivities are held, like coronations and royal weddings and royal funerals. And then on the right, that's the Moonlight Pavilion, which is one of the most beautiful buildings I have ever been in. It's the largest of several open air pavilions inside the palace compound. And it's the site of public religious celebrations and festivals and banquets. And also a lot of concerts are held here for the public. Concerts of classical Khmer music and dancing. The next picture, please, Barb. On the left, this is the Silver Pagoda, and it houses many of Cambodia's most prized treasures, including the royal jewels and several gem-encrusted statues of Buddha, and the crystal Buddha, which is a 14-inch statue of Buddha believed to have been carved from a single clear crystal in the 14th century. And then the most important of all is called the Maitreya Buddha. And it is a life-sized standing statue of Buddha, which is encrusted with 9,584 multi-carat gem quality cut diamonds. And that's all inside of that little building right there. And then one of the most interesting things about this palace compound to me, because I had never seen it anywhere else, on the right, do you see the little white building in the sort of in the center there? There are several of these around inside of the palace grounds. All of the traditional architecture here was designed and built by Khmer architects and artisans, but they actually brought in French architects and artisans to design these buildings as guest houses for visiting Western dignitaries, because they thought they would be much more comfortable if they could be housed in Western buildings. And this is the only time anywhere in the world I ever saw anything like that. Okay, so that's our visit to the Royal Palace in Phnom Penh. Do we have any questions or comments before we move on?
There's one. Cheryl, you want to unmute and ask Ken directly?
Yeah, Ken, did you and Mel, or do they allow tourists to go into that coronation hall or any of these buildings?
Yes, we could go into the Coronation Hall. Yes, we went into the Coronation Hall. We went into the Moonlight Pavilion. Some of these are called the public areas. There are several parts of the palace compound, of course, which we couldn't go into. That, of course, included the royal residences. And then one of the most interesting, which was pointed out to us, It was behind a large wall, and it was the king's harem quarters, which are empty now. But in the 19th century, several of the monarchs had up to 100 wives, and they all lived in the court, these courts behind that wall. And what was really fascinating about this to me was, unlike the harems like in the Middle East that we know about that were guarded and protected by eunuchs, this area with where all of the wives lived, the king was the only male who was allowed to enter there. Everybody else in there was either one of the wives or a female slave who served wives, but only the king was the only male who could enter that area. There were no eunuchs or any other males or anybody else. But these areas that I've shown you here were the public areas that we were allowed to be in. Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. Okay, so we're ready to move on.
Ken, one more question quickly.
Sure.
How do you Khmer?
Khmer?
Mhm.
Yes. I'm sorry, what was the question?
How do you pronounce it?
How
What is
you,
the proper way?
Khmer. Yeah, people in worldwide pronounce it Khmer because Khmer Rouge. The people who became familiar with what happened there in terms of the genocide called it the Khmer Rouge. We don't know how they pronounced it, 2,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago, but it is the name of the ethnic peoples who originally inhabited. Just like Siamese are the names of the original ethnic people, the Chams that's the ethnic name for the original inhabitants of what we now call South Vietnam. And so it's an ethnic name. Yeah.
and
Okay.
then Ken, Darcel
Yeah.
has one more. Darcel, you want to mute?
Well, I just said, talk about sister wives.
Yes, that's right. It was all women going on in there,
All
Okay,
right,
are we
there you
ready
go.
to move on?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, this is an aerial view of Angkor Wat. Of course, I didn't take this picture. I did take all the other pictures that we will see what we're talking about, but I wanted you to have this perspective. Angkor Wat is the largest religious monument in the world. It covers over 1,000 acres. What we're looking at here is the main temple, which is only a small part of the whole complex. So in addition to what you're seeing here, which is close to the city of Siem Reap and the second middle star that we saw earlier on the map, in the 1800s, explorers discovered a chain of small temples in the jungles extending northwest of Angkor Wat into Thailand and southeast of Angkor Wat down through Cambodia and into Vietnam. And they are believed to have been part of the original building project sometime around 800 of the Common Era. And many of those temples that extend all the way across Southeast Asia and are satellites of Angkor Wat are still in existence today. Also, more recently in 2015, a group of archaeologists from the University of Sydney announced that they had discovered a previously unknown series of ruins, which they described as, quote, massive structures whose purpose is still unknown on the south side of the main temple complex, which would be right to the right of what we're looking at right now. Okay, next slide, please, Bard. So some archaeologists believe that the original foundation for that main temple, which you can see behind the picture of me and Mel there, and then these pictures, very kind of cloudy the day we were there, so these pictures are not real bright. But these main temple structures that you saw from the air there, many archaeologists believe that those foundations go back as far as 2000 BCE. But the construction of the structures that we're looking at here began around 800 year of the Common Era And that was at the very beginning of the Khmer Empire. And they probably took about 100 years to build. When the Chinese explorers first came to Angkor Wat in the 13th century, and then the Japanese explorers came in the 15th century and saw this thing. Now you have to imagine that these are ruins. You have to imagine this thing at its height when it was painted, we're told gold and red and white. That it just was, it had to just be something unbelievable, because the Japanese and the Chinese went back to their countries telling everybody that it could not possibly have been built by human hands. And so their stories were that Angkor Wat was a divine construction. And for hundreds of years, the Chinese insisted that it was built by the gods overnight. The first Westerner that we know of to visit Angkor Wat was a Portuguese missionary named Antonio de Madalena. And in 1586, he wrote, quote, "It is of such extraordinary construction that words cannot describe it. It has towers and decorations and refinements not even the highest of human genius has ever conceived of." Next picture, Barb. When Angkor Wat was originally constructed, around 800, it was a Hindu temple. But in 1177, it was overrun and sacked by the Chams people, who are that group we talked about earlier from South Vietnam. So the next Khmer king, who was Jayavarman VII, believing that the Hindu gods had failed them, converted Angkor Wat into a Buddhist shrine. So walking around the ruins, we can still see Hindu iconography like what you're looking at right there, which is more Hindu than Buddhist. But next, Barb. But the evidence of the transformation into a Buddhist shrine is even more evident. If you can see on the left-hand side, there is a little statue of Buddha that has been inserted into a wall. There are literally thousands of those in the temple complex. Thank you. And then the middle one is a frieze of hundreds of statues of sitting Buddha around the base of many of the buildings. And then there are a number of still active Buddhist shrines within this huge temple. And the picture on the right is of one of those. Okay, next picture. So the history of Angkor Wat includes periods of centuries when most or all of it was overtaken by the jungle. And so it was actually disappeared from the rest of the world, except for a few people. These pictures show the extent of that neglect. You can see on the left there a statue that is almost totally surrounded by a tree, and then some of the temple ruins that have just been overcome by tree roots on the right there. It actually adds to the mystery and fascination of this place, when you are walking through it. In the 17th century, there was a French missionary and explorer who claimed to have rediscovered Angkor after one of those periods when it disappeared into the jungle. And he wrote, quote, "This had to be erected by some ancient Michelangelo because it far surpasses anything left to us by Greece or Rome," close quote. Next picture, Barb. So adjacent to the temple grounds that we were just looking at, archaeologists have uncovered areas, acres of areas like the ones you're seeing now, that were dedicated to royal processions and to dramatic reenactments. In the picture on the right, you can see the top of the main temple in the background, so you can kind of get a picture of how far away this still is. And our guide explained to us that thousands of people would come and surround these parade grounds, and that the procession grounds would feature up to 1,000 trained elephants and thousands of costume performers in pageants and festivals, sometimes that would last for weeks at a time. Next picture. Earlier, I mentioned to you that in the 19th century, explorers discovered a chain of small temples that extended all the way across Southeast Asia, but clearly were connected to Angkor Wat. And these pictures are are of one of those locations. It's located at the top star that we saw in Southeast Thailand, just above the northern Cambodian border. I apologize for the quality of these pictures. These are reproductions of pictures that I took there 56 years ago.
Wow.
These were slides, you know, and so that's why they're not as clear as some of the other pictures. In Thai, this place is called Prasat Hen Wat Prabhujatipanam 1, which means the stone ruins of the temple of Buddha at Phnom 1. And these ruins are in the jungle there at that location in Southeast Thailand. They're at the end of a barely passable road, but I visited these ruins about 30 or 40 times, and I developed a really deep, important relationship with some of the monks there. All of the ancient ruins, you may know this, but they're very seldom rebuilt, because once they are destroyed for any kind of reason, they become very, very important, and they become guarded and protected by orders of Buddhist monks. Most of them, like the two Buddhist monks that you see in the picture there, are brought here as young boys. They're usually 10 or 12 years old. Their parents bring them there. They dedicate them to this purpose, and most of them live in this one place for the rest of their lives. They live here all of their lives, and they die here. And their two main purposes are to preserve the history of this particular site and to protect the ruins and the relics that are located in each of these particular sites. The history of this temple is that it was destroyed by elephant warfare between the Khmer people and the Siamese people in the 13th century, about 100 years after Angkor Wat was being transformed from a Hindu shrine into a Buddhist shrine. There were all of these border war skirmishes between the Thais and the Khmers, and this is one of the smaller temples that was destroyed by elephant warfare during that time. And there were a number of sacred relics here, and one of them was a sandstone pedestal that had supported a 3-foot tall standing carved statue of Buddha. And during that 13th century elephant warfare, the statue had been knocked off of the pedestal, leaving just the stone with the feet of Buddha on top of that stone. And in Buddhism, you may know, the feet and the footprints of Buddha are considered particularly sacred objects for veneration. So like now, for example, from India all the way to Japan, you can find hundreds of shrines built around what are believed to be the footprints of Buddha. Most of them are found in caves, and they're preserved in mud and dust. The next picture there, Barb, this is that stone pedestal from the temple ruins at Phnom 1. When I left Thailand, the monks there presented this to me as a gift. And so needless to say, it's about 1,000 years old. It is the pedestal that held the 3-foot standing statue of Buddha. And so it's obviously one of my most prized possessions in the world. Okay, any questions or comments on Angkor?
Ken,
Yes.
Del, you want to talk about whether you all should go on your own or join a tour? Or I heard after you posted your question, I heard Ken say our guide. So Ken, maybe can you speak to that? What you would suggest as far as folks coming to Angkor Wat?
About whether you should have a guide, or is that the question?
A guide or a tour, you know, Barb went
Oh,
on a
yes,
tour.
absolutely. Oh, yes, absolutely. You know, there are places in the world, and I, you know, as a tourist and a traveler, I love to be on my own, you know, in places and just wander around and discover things. You know, and then there are places where you really need a guide to understand what you're seeing, what's happening. And to go to Angkor in Siem Reap, I would definitely say get a guide. Our guide was indispensable to us. He was so knowledgeable, you know, and I had guidebooks and I had read stuff and all of that, but still, you know, to have a person explaining and showing us things that we would not otherwise seen, or if we saw them, we wouldn't really have understood what they really were. That was indispensable. So yes, I would definitely say that. Siem Reap is about an hour and a half plane ride from Phnom Penh. And when we were there, at least, you can take buses there. We were advised not to take a bus because there are a lot of bandits on that road. And so we flew. It took about an hour and a half. We had a really nice little hotel in Siem Reap. This is still a almost like a third world country, and so, expect to live differently than you're going to live in other parts of the world while you're there. But yes, I would definitely say, get yourself a good guidebook and get yourself a good guide.
Okay. Thanks. I kind of thought maybe that was the answer, but I just wanted to kind of get your recommendation. Thank you.
And at the same time, don't let that be your only experience. Like we spent like 2 days in Angkor, but we spent almost a week in Siem Reap. And so we walked around, we talked to people, we met people, we saw a lot of stuff. And so don't just limit it to a guide,
Sure.
But I think a guide is indispensable for something as complicated and comprehensive as this history around, particularly around Angkor. Okay, ready?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we got back to Phnom Penh, and one day Mel said to me, I want to take you somewhere and show you something. And when I tried to get him to tell me where we were going, he just said, it's a surprise. And so we got in a tuk-tuk, which is one of the little 3-wheel, taxis that are all over Asia. And we traveled across Phnom Penh, and we stopped at a building with a big sign on the front of it that said, New Future for Children. And it was an orphanage for children, all of whose parents had died of AIDS. And so I was introduced to the staff. We had a wonderful tour of the facilities. Then we got to visit with the children. All of them were studying English in their classes at the orphanage. And so they were eager to talk to us, in their English. And then we took group pictures like the ones that you see here. On the left, you can see Mel and me in the middle of both of those pictures there. Next slide, please, Barb. And then, to my surprise, the staff cooked this wonderful traditional Cambodian meal for us, and we sat on the floor and ate with the staff and with the children. Next slide. Then after dinner, we were given kind of front row seats of honor, and they brought out traditional Cambodian musical instruments, all of which were played by children in the orphanage. And I mean, really, they were highly skilled musicians. And after they had serenaded us for a few minutes with classical Khmer music, they were joined by the choir that you see on the right there, and they sang traditional Cambodian songs for us. And then next slide, please, Barb. And then we were treated to this program of classical Khmer dancing, all performed by the children in the orphanage. Next slide. While they were dancing, one of the staff members said to me, they made all of their own costumes just for this performance for you and Mel. Next slide. And when I went back and was looking at these pictures in preparation for this, I couldn't help but think of what I was thinking of then. What incredibly beautiful people these are. Just look at these people physically. They are just incredibly beautiful people.
They're the prettiest Asian
Children. Remember, all of these children's parents had died of AIDS. Can you go back to that last slide, please, Barb? All of these children's parents had died of AIDS, and some of them really recently. And to watch them caring for each other was just the most moving and amazing. experience. And they were so dedicated to education. They wanted education. They wanted to learn. They wanted to become professionals so they could bring their country back into the world again, because it had been taken out of the world through the genocide. And they were just some of the most remarkable people I've ever met in my entire life. Next slide, Bart. So we were getting ready to leave, and all of a sudden the children lined up and they started presenting Mel with these beautiful glossy portraits of themselves. And so I was sitting by one of the staff members and I leaned over and said, "This is just amazing. What's the occasion, for this?" And he said, "Don't you know, this orphanage wouldn't even exist without Mel White." He said, "Mel and Gary provide over half of the annual budget that keeps the doors of this orphanage open." And until that minute, I did not know that. Mel had never told me that. I didn't even know this orphanage existed. And so that was just one of those moments, when somebody you already love just ascends to almost sainthood, in your mind. It's one of the reasons that I love Mel so much. And Mel is really struggling physically right now. If you are a prayer or a person who sends out, positive energy, send him some, because he's really, really suffering and struggling with some really difficult physical issues right now. Okay. I want to show you, how when you go to motels and hotels, there's always a sign on the back of your door. This was the sign on the back of my door of the last hotel we stayed in Phnom Penh. It says, "Police require us to inform you that illegal drugs, guns, nuclear warheads, surface-to-air missiles, and other weaponry are prohibited on the premises."
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. I was so happy for that. Okay, our time is up, and that concludes our travel log to Cambodia tonight. Anybody got any questions we might just close with real briefly here?
Tony's just wondering how
Ken,
you
the-
made it out of there without taking a few of those children back, Ken.
Oh, I'm telling you, that was one of the most emotional experiences I've ever had. Because first of all, many of their parents lived through the genocide. This is the next generation after the genocide. Remember, 1979 was not that long ago, when they were still killing 2,000 people a day. And so these children that's a part of their legacy. So you can imagine that's a part of their dedication to education, wanting to bring their country back into the world in a positive way. But it also explains their need for affection and affirmation. And I think there were 70 something children there when we were there. There wasn't a one of those children, male, female, age, didn't make any difference, that didn't literally just hug me and hang on to me, at least once during that. We got there about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We left about 8 o'clock that night. So it was an extremely moving, and you can go and Google New Future for Children, Cambodia. It's still going strong. It's still going really strong.
Ken, there was another question about the children and whether they had ever met Mel prior to this visit.
No, this was the first. They knew who Mel was because they had been told. They had been told that Mel is coming to visit. That's why they made the costumes, rehearsed the dances, did all of that. But this is the first time that they had ever met Mel.
Really special.
Yeah. Okay, and this was
Okay.
just, I know this takes so much time to prepare. I don't know, Barb, you're probably of all people can can affirm that the hours that it takes to
Takes a minute, yep.
choose the pictures, you know, and then to decide what to say, how to put them together and decide what to say about each one and to fit it into an hour of our time. I'm just so glad so many folks were able to come tonight. And Bud and Dell, it looks like we're going to tag you for Alaska. Cheryl could not stop talking about your pictures. And many of you know that in the pre-COVID world, the Sanctuary at Sea was hoping to take an Alaska cruise. I believe it was going to be actually this summer. So maybe we can live vicariously through that. And I heard Barb say she was willing to kind of help you craft it out. And as you now know, with Barb's 3 Egypts and this tonight, Ken, just masterfully put together. So how about we do in Zoom? I love to take yourselves off mute and do some real live applause and say thank you so much, Ken. That was just
Yay, thank you,
And
Ken.
And Barb, I dumped a bunch of pictures on Barb, and literally Barb put that entire PowerPoint together. Yeah.
okay.
Thank
Do it
you,
again for Barb.
Hey, Barb, hey, Barb.
I will tell you, we should be all caught up now, I think, on getting all the old or the previous recordings up. We had a little bit of trouble as different people recorded those onto their computers, and you need to have the physical computer to load them up onto YouTube. But I think we're all caught up. So I've got a gang of friends going to, they're taking a cruise to Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia. And so Barb, we're going to put all 3 of your links together for them. And so they can actually take a look at all those amazing Egyptian travelogues and learn before they go. Kind of like what you're saying tonight, Ken. Learn as much as you can before you get there, right? And then have a great guide.
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
More. Yeah. Yeah. Well, any final questions, my friend? It's 8 after the hour. Anything else for Ken except a whole bunch of love?
Thank you, Ken.
Whole bunch of love.
Hey,
Thanks, y'all. Be
Y'all.
safe out there. Wash your
Ken,
hands.
Yeah.
Stay safe. Enjoy the colors if you're north. Enjoy the coolness if you're south.
Papa,
Bye, y'all.
Papa.
Night.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.